friends. Here on Crossovers, we're all about celebrating artists who cross over from stage to screen to music and other performance and creative work. We've been fortunate to bring you artists who not only cross over artistically, but who win Tony and Emmy Awards in the process. We continue that tonight. Our guest won a Tony for Best Actor in a Musical for his role as Lieutenant Frank Cioffi in Curtains, and won 4 Emmys as Niles Crane on the celebrated TV show Frasier. He directed It Should Have Been You on Broadway and is currently starring in The Visitor off-Broadway, which just got extended for another week, so please go see it. I just did, and it's spectacular. I'm so happy to sit down for a conversation with my friend David Hyde Pierce. DHP, how are you?
Stokes. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for being here on your one day off a week.
No, it's a pleasure. Three names. We had to get together.
I know, we're so pretentious, aren't we?
Yes, exactly.
So how's the show going? I really loved it. I just thought
Thank
it was terrific, and you're as spectacular as always.
Thank you.
I realize I think I've seen you in just about everything you've ever done on stage.
It's why I'm
New York
here.
City. I know.
I owe you for all those. The show is going well. We're having a good time, and it's winding down, which is sad, but it's a great company and a very close company, and so yeah, it's really beautiful.
It's an unusual show too. The content of the show being about immigration and the way it affects those that are going through that, and the way and other people as well. Is that a subject you followed closely ever before you did the show?
That's a good question. You know, through my life, I've had friends who were immigrants or first generation. Family. My brother-in-law Bill wrote beautiful articles about his family's travels from Russia to get here. So I've been aware of it, and of course, over the last years, been particularly aware of the struggles and trials in this country, especially of immigrant families. And but then this show in particular really focuses on that, and I think it attempts to meet the challenge of capturing and expressing with understanding and respect something that is so huge, and yet also so intimate and personal. So it's a complicated journey for the show to try to handle this, and but a lot of really beautiful stuff in it, and a beautiful, amazing company.
Yeah, and a great score too. Tom Kitt and everybody. The choreography, Lauren Lataro.
Yes, good old Lauren.
Oh yeah, it was just I thought just a spectacular show all the way around, and really unusual material for a musical. That's not the kind of.
Well, and the other thing that's cool about it, one of the immigrant characters is a Syrian drummer, and so plays the djembe, and so percussion and the djembe and drums play a huge part in the score, and we have an amazing Japanese drummer, Taka, this is his first show he's ever done. He's never been in a theatrical show. He's just this amazing musician.
He's the one that opens the show?
He opens the show, he plays throughout, he coached all of us who are playing, and he's also, like so many of the people in the show, his spirit is just so amazing. And when they said, will you sing? He said, sure. Will you dance? Yep. And he just does it with the passion and joy of someone doing it for the first time, which of course rejuvenates all of us who are 100 and have been in a few musicals. It's really cool.
Yeah, that's one of the things I loved about the choreography too. Is it felt so natural. It felt like it just came out of everybody, in the way everybody executed it as well.
I think there's a lot of personal contribution as well. I think something that became truer and truer the more we worked on the show is that everyone involved needed to have some kind of I hate to use this word because it's used so much, but agency, some kind of real input, and something that I think across the boards people feel when they see the show is the individuality of the people in the so-called ensemble. They play multiple characters, but each one is so personally and deeply crafted, and I think that includes the movement that Lauren gave them and sort of evoked from them. Lauren and also Matt and Shay are the other choreographers. So it's very cool.
Were the challenges getting the show up, like not only with the political climate we're in now, but also with the pandemic and everything as well? I mean, how did those affect the whole process? Because you closed or didn't open
Yeah.
Where were you, like in the
So
pre-process?
we were, I think it was March 12th, and we were maybe a few days away from starting tech, from actually moving into the theater when the public shut down rehearsals because of the pandemic. And we'd already been through the, oh, it's getting worse and we're all touching elbows and we think we're okay, but no one knows. And but we were ready to do the show. We were ready to go on and open the show. And then we had the pandemic, and we had a year and a half. And during that year and a half, a lot of things happened. A lot of life and a lot of death happened. And also, we as a company stayed in contact through Zoom. We had every Saturday night at 6 o'clock, we would all get in touch with each other. Sometimes it would be a big group, sometimes just a few. So that what we were all experiencing through the course of this, life-changing, world-changing time, we were all in contact with each other. And because this is such a tight group, such a close company, what affects one of us affects all of us. So even though we were ready to go with a show that we were ready to put on stage in March, by the time we returned to the show in September of this year, the world had changed, our lives had changed, our perspective had changed, and there was a lot of talk and a lot of very passionate input from people about how do we tell this story? Can we tell this story? Whose story is it? How do we do this? How do we give voice to all of these people and their concerns? And so much of the, how the pandemic has made everything harder?
Yeah.
Even stuff that's seemingly unrelated, just things are tough.
Yeah.
And I think, the explosions in the country and the anger and everything, it all is partially because we're not on stable ground. Well, this is a troupe of artists, and they are people with their eyes and ears and hearts open, and they are people who express what they feel, and therefore we were not immune to the same roiling passions that the world has been going through. Mm-hmm. And we were shaken a lot, but to the incredible credit of everyone at the Public Theater and the company and the crew, we opened the show. People will never know how hard that was, how at some points unlikely it was. So what people see on stage is in some ways the result of time lost because we were dealing with issues instead of rehearsing a show, but it is also heart and soul invested in a company and a show staying together. And that's what and anyone you look at on that stage now, we are all so close, and we know what we've done, and we're very proud of it.
It's incredible, and you see that and you feel that, and that's one of the things that I loved about it. And it's interesting how you mentioned what affects one person affects everybody, and that's been what we've been through as a nation, as a country, and it's very much the theme of what your show is as well.
Absolutely. We literally, at one point, there's a lyric: "We stand or else we fall as one."
Yeah. So go see it. Go see the show.
Sure.
You have to see the show. So let's back up a second.
Okay.
So acting. How did you start acting? How did you get the acting bug? Because I keep hearing you when we talk. I hear a lot of artists in your family. It seems writers and or lyricists or librettists and all kinds of people.
So there's a lot of talented people in my family. I may actually be the best known and least talented of them. That's okay. I have no problem with that. The younger generation is coming along. Here's the thing. My mom and dad were middle class people. Dad worked in an insurance agency, and mom was his wife, and so they weren't like artists in that sense. Although my dad, I later found out, had always wanted to be an actor, and he got out of college in like 1932. Wanted to be an actor. His dad had a little insurance agency. This is upstate New York, Saratoga Springs. And he said to him, listen, why don't we wait till this depression thing blows over before you go trying to be an actor, and then we'll see what happens. And he stayed, and he worked in the office, and he met my mom, and they fell in love, and then they got married, and he went off to World War II and all that. And he never got to be a professional actor, but he acted in community theater before I came along, and apparently was amazing, and really funny, and really great. So even though they didn't end up being artists, they had that inspiration, that respect. They had a respect for acting. But what happened, this is the cool thing, that when I was a little boy, I think I was like 8 years old, and they built a big performing arts center in my hometown. And it became the summer home of the New York City Ballet and the Philadelphia Orchestra. So first of all, in this relatively small town, all of us were exposed to art at the highest level. You know, nobody better than those institutions. But I specifically remember, this is why I'm an actor, I can pinpoint it. There was a production, George Balanchine did a ballet version of A Midsummer Night's Dream. And at the end, the Mendelssohn music for it is exquisitely beautiful. And at the end of that piece, there's this very quiet sort of duet of flutes and things as the music fades away. And Arthur Mitchell, who was one of the great dancers in New York City Ballet at the time, he danced Puck. And in the ballet, Puck's last speech to the audience, "If we shadows have offended," thing, but this is all is mended, is a dance. And Arthur is out there dancing, you know, winding up. I think he was sweeping up. There's like fairies all around him. And the last chord plays, and the curtain comes down. And as the curtain comes down, he floats up into the air. And every time I tell this story, I get the same feeling I did when I was 8. And I didn't know. Years later, I thought, did I imagine that? How did they do that? And they had a revival like 3 years ago at New York City here. And I went just so I could see how it ended. And sure enough, while they're dancing around him, they hook him up with a wire so that as he bows at the end, he can float up into. But that was so magical. That was it. I was like, I don't know what this is. I know I'm not a ballet dancer, but this is magic. And that moment stayed with me, and I know that's what I've always been drawn to.
Did you know at that moment that's what I want to do, or did you just feel the magic of it? And
I was changed in that moment. I didn't even know that at the time. I just know in retrospect that's what happened.
We've had a conversation before about how art can change people in like one epiphanal moment.
Yeah.
You know,
yes.
other than a traumatic something that happens like war or something like that.
Right.
I don't know anything else that has the ability to change people instantly.
But now,
except for art, and in a positive way, almost always.
Yes. But you started as a little tiny person, right?
No, I started singing young and playing the piano when I was 6. And so I was always involved with it, but I didn't start performing until I was 14 years old.
But what? Because that's kind of the same question.
Yeah.
What got you started playing the piano and singing? Did you just spontaneously combust, or?
Apparently my family tells me, because I was 6 years old. We were living in Guam at the time because I was raised overseas, and they said that I asked for an organ. And it must be because I heard an organ in church and I was fascinated. I don't ever remember asking for it. And they got me a fan organ, which is like a little organ with fans. And it's like old, remember the old pump organs?
Yeah.
It's like the modern version of a pump organ, except for it had fans in it, so you didn't have to actually work your feet. And I remember sitting down at this instrument and I was transfixed by it from the get-go.
There you go. That was your moment.
It was my moment. It absolutely was. It was like, and what was fascinating to me, and this sounds like a sort of what happened with you in your moment, it was like I realized when certain combinations of keys made me feel a particular way.
Oh, wow.
You know, like a major key and a minor key, and
wow.
you know, or you can put dissonance in there, and you can do all these different kinds of things in it. And so before I even knew the names of the notes, I literally started just playing by ear. It was me sitting down and just experimenting with this key, and I fell in love with it immediately. So it was the same kind of thing.
That resonance, that is so cool to hear that, because you know it makes me think, well, who were you before? Who were you in another life that, you know, that this thing spoke to you? Like, you had an emotional reaction to certain harmonies and things. That is awesome.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what that is either.
Did you ever go on to play the organ? Did you ever?
Oh, I played it every day until I played the organ and the piano. That was my
Because I
major
also
instrument.
studied organ.
Did you really? Are you
absolutely
serious?
did. I studied piano and organ, and I played in churches for a while.
So did I.
Yeah,
I was a church organist. Did you have a full pedal board?
I did.
Oh, were you good with the heels and the toes on the pedals?
That's none of your business.
Oh, okay. Sounds like a no.
I was okay. I was never. Were you? Were you like a real?
I was good with the one foot because I had an organ with the one foot, so I was good with the left foot. But I did start studying with the person who played the organ at the the Organ Pavilion in San Diego, in Balboa Park.
Oh,
There's an
sure.
Organ Pavilion. There was a guy that
That's a theater organ. That's a like.
That's a major organ. So they had one backstage. It was like a Hammond B3 with a full pedal board. So
nice.
I remember practicing on that, and then I would go to other churches that had a full one. But I never got spectacular with the heel toe on it. I learned it okay, but I was really good with the left foot only.
Yeah, I was. Sounds like I was better than that, but I wasn't. I wasn't.
Okay.
But it wasn't dependable. It wasn't like some of the the big solo passages with your feet.
That's I didn't know that. That's so crazy that we have that in common.
Yeah.
Wow. And you were the organist in your church for how long?
I wasn't the organist. I was like an assistant. I studied organ in my family's church, and I would play, sometimes for services. And I played for my sister's wedding, and I remember. And the minister, Father Park, great man, who came from radio, and so he had this wonderful radio voice, and he was up there, and it was the moment where he said, "You may kiss the bride," and that's where I was supposed to play the Mendelssohn. It was the Mendelssohn Wedding March from A Midsummer Night's Dream. What are the odds? Bum, 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 so they could process out, and he said, "You may now kiss the bride," and they kissed, and I just burst into tears, and I sat there, and the minister was up there on the altar going, just like from his radio days, and finally I got it together and played.
Yeah,
So
that's good. Good thing you take direction well.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Crazy.
So let's stick with theater for a while. Okay, Uta Hagen. We talked about respect for acting.
Yes.
You made a little joke there that was an in-joke between you and me only,
Yes.
and it's because. DHP gave me this. We were talking about this earlier on, and this is a book that blew the top of my head off, which is Uta Hagen's book, Respect for Acting, and it's one of the great books on method acting.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about your relationship with Uta Hagen. And by the way, if you can read on the screen, he wrote the foreword to this new version of the book.
Yeah, it's a reissue of the original. And they asked me to. So Ms. Hagen and I worked together. The last play she ever did was in 2001 out at the Geffen Theater in Los Angeles, and it was a play called 6 Dance Lessons in 6 Weeks. It was a 2-character play about a retired widow who hires this young former chorus boy to give her dance lessons, and each scene is a different dance, and it is the shape of the play is basically how their relationship develops from a lot of antagonism to great affection, which is exactly what happened to my relationship with Ms. Hagen over the course of us rehearsing this, because I had never met her, I had never studied with her, but in college, her book was the book. And when I got this job, I thought, well, this is a 2-person play, and she's Uta Hagen, but it can't be a teacher-student relationship. We have to be equals on the stage. So, I reread the book, the other book, Challenge for the Actor. I just did a lot of research and took a lot of dance lessons so I would know what the heck a chorus boy, what dances he would know how to dance. And we got together. I met her here at, was it at Babbo? I think it was at Babbo, because she lived right on Washington Square, and with the director, and we met, and it seemed to go well. It was St. Patrick's Day, I remember, of 2001 that we met. And so we cut to the Geffen and we're rehearsing, and the first day of rehearsal, we're starting a scene, and she says to the director, if he says that line like that, I won't get my laugh. And I thought, wait a minute, I read your book, and in your book you say you're not supposed to tell other actors how to do things. And what do you mean won't get your laugh? I thought you were about real teacups in the kitchen sink. But I thought, okay, fine. And then we got to a moment where her character was fed up with me and was going to fire me. And this was back when you had phones that you picked up and dialed. Someone can explain this in a footnote to the audience. But so the bit was that she would go to dial my boss to get me fired, and I would put my finger on the button to cut the phone off.
We'll explain that in the footnote.
Yeah,
too.
again, that's and so we're rehearsing, and I did that, and she started dialing again, and I hit the button again, just spontaneously to do that. And she stopped, and she looked at me, and she said, "We're not going to do that, that's cheap." And I looked at her, and I said, "It's not cheap. You're trying to get me fired, I'm trying to stop you, and this is rehearsal." And she took the phone and she slammed it down and she said, "Okay." And she walked away and she went down. There's a table, you know, at the end of the rehearsal hall, and she sat down and she took out a cigarette and she lit it and she's smoking the cigarette, and the whole room is like completely quiet. And she says, across the room to me, she says, "I wish you would have some respect for me." And I walked over to the table and I put my hands on the table and I looked at her face and I said, "As long as I live, I will have nothing but respect for you." And the stage manager said, "Let's take a 5." And so we cleared the room and she and I went at it. And it was tough because she was really angry and upset. And I now know, probably scared. She was 83. She was going back on stage for the first time in a while and all that. She didn't know who the hell I was. Yeah. And I knew that the outcome of this conversation would be we would have a show, we wouldn't have a show. So I kept talking to her and I kept reassuring her, and she was putting on her coat and picking up her stuff, and I was talking to her and she was talking back to me, and then we walked out of the rehearsal hall, and at the Geffen there you walk out of the rehearsal hall and into the theater, and we walked down the theater as we were talking, and we kept talking, went out the theater door, and we got to her car, and by the time we were at her car, we were in love. And that relationship lasted through that show, one of the pivotal experiences of my entire life as an actor. It lasted beyond that show. It lasted, sadly, when she subsequently had a stroke later that fall, and right up to her last breath. We were just intimate, and I will always be grateful for what I learned from her, working with her. Yeah.
That's an incredible story.
And it was everything you would hope. My favorite, the best thing that someone said about it, they said it wasn't like watching a play, it was like eavesdropping. That made me very happy. And it was, I just want to say, the essence of it was different every night, but it wasn't radically different. She was very much about, she wanted to know, she insisted that she have the refrigerator in her kitchen in the rehearsal room from the first day. She wanted to have opened and closed that refrigerator door 100 times so that it was without thinking. And so and everything, the staging that we settled on, it wasn't radically different, but every night it was different because it just happened here. And that was that was a real lesson of like, oh wow. I walked on, she walked on, we started, and
did that
we ended.
Totally change you as an actor?
Yes.
Then from that moment on?
It totally changed me in this, but it also sort of affirmed something I sort of already believed, but at a way higher level. And can I tell you one more story about her?
Yeah, these are amazing.
So this is great. So, I mean, second preview, I think it was. So after each of these dance lesson scenes, we'd be on the stage, there'd be a blackout, and then we'd go off. It was a kitchen sort of living room set. I'd go out the front door in the dark, she'd go out the kitchen, and there'd be someone waiting there with a flashlight to guide us off. We'd do our quick change for the next scene and be ready to come on. We got to, doesn't matter what scene it was, blackout, we go off to our separate places, and I'm in the middle of my change on my side of the stage, and I hear this tremendous crash. And I have no idea what it is because no one's moving furniture or anything. I thought somehow the sofa had been, dumped off the stage or something. And my dresser goes out to see what's happened, and she comes back and says, "It's Miss Hagen." And I go out, and she has fallen off the stage. And what happened was, in the blackout, she mistook the lights going up the aisle for the light off stage, and she walked, and the stage was probably about 4 feet high. Walked 83 and fell, and when I came out, the lights were up, she was on her back in the house with her feet up on the stage. There was a doctor with her. They called the emergency room. Geffen is right next to UCLA emergency room. They somehow got her, I guess they figured out she was okay, up and into a side room, and I was with her there, and she wanted to go back on. And she was really stubborn, and she said, "I want to go back on." And no one could convince her. Finally, the managing director came in and said, "Listen, all of these people are going to be coming back. We are going to give them seats to come back to see the show. But we don't want you to just go on tonight. We want you to be able to go on every night." And she finally relented, and he walked away. And she turned to me and she said, "I just wanted to get my hand." She just wanted to hear that applause when she went back on stage. And the final part of it is the emergency people came. We went across the street to the emergency room. She's in a wheelchair. The guy's checking her in and asking her questions, and he says, "Do you have osteoporosis?" And she says, in her hat, having just fallen off the stage at 83, she says, "If I had osteoporosis, they would have brought me over here in a dustpan." and she was on the next night, and we did the whole run.
And that's why we love people from the theater.
Yeah.
Tough people,
Yeah,
and
she
just
was
like,
the real deal.
oh, that's incredible. That's a
Yeah.
great story.
Oh,
I know you
God
have
bless
1,000 more stories. We could sit here talking. I would.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have another show when we do that.
Okay, okay.
But oh man, there's so many fantastic stories about her. But let's move on. Let's stay in the theatrical.
Yeah,
Theatrical.
anything.
So 2005, you played Sir Robin, the not quite so brave as Sir Lancelot Knight.
Yes.
In the Tony Award-winning Spamalot, and that's adapted from the film The Holy Grail, right?
Monty Python and the Holy Grail, yes.
So were you a Monty Python fan before that?
That doesn't begin to describe it. Yes. So when I was in high school, Monty Python, the TV series, first came over to the States. And sort of like that New York City ballet moment, I can remember sitting in front of the television. You know what? It was late at night. I had come back from practicing the organ at the church because I had the key to the church, and I would go in after school and practice, and it was like 11 o'clock at night. I remember because I had to turn out the lights in the church, and it was always, once you stop playing the organ, that's when you hear the silence and the creaking and the what's happening in this big, and I would always have to like run down the aisle and turn out the lights and get out. So I got home from doing that, and I turned on PBS, and there was this show, and I remember it was, the sketch they were doing was the boring life of a chartered public accountant. And it was all this, I think it was, I can't remember if it was John Cleese or not, but he was coming out and he had his bowler hat, and he didn't notice all the things going on around him. So like, and the first thing I saw, and I was like 16, I think, or 17, he goes to the tobacconist and he's paying for like a newspaper and stuff and doesn't see that the woman behind the counter is completely naked. Like on television, completely naked. And I was like, what? And then he walks out and, you know, a Zulu warrior comes up and throws a spear, but he goes down to pick up something and doesn't see it. So that was the whole sketch. Not one of their best sketches even, but oh my God, I was home. I just thought, this craziness, I couldn't wait to see the next one. So yes, I was a total nut about Monty Python. In fact, the reason that I was involved with it is Mike Nichols directed it, and I had worked with Mike on some things. I did a movie with him and a play. And when Frasier was winding down, I was sitting in the green room with the other actors, and I opened up the paper, and it said, Mike Nichols to direct Broadway musical of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And the other thing at this point was, I had been studying voice with Calvin Remsburg, my voice teacher, my first voice teacher out in LA, with the idea that I thought, I want to do a musical, because I had never, even though I had music training, I'd never done a musical. And I started doing benefits out there, the stage benefit, which was an AIDS benefit,
Yeah,
and
I
they'd have all these people sing. And I did Boys from Syracuse in their version of Reprise, Encore,
Yes,
whichever it was called.
Reprise over there.
Reprise. And I thought, this is a world I haven't explored, and I would love to do it. So I saw that headline, and I called my agent, and I said, I don't care what the part is, I have to be in this. And so then they did a reading of it, and they put us all together, and I ended up playing basically the Eric Idle roles in the show, and he wrote it, so I had to uncomfortably play his roles while he was sitting next to me in the first reading.
So what was it? Was that the first time you met him?
Yeah.
Was in the first reading?
Yeah.
And what did that feel like for you? Were you like nervous, or were you like, okay, I'll show him what I can do with this?
No,
Or
I
were you
definitely
like,
was not. I'll show him what I can do. I basically thought, why am I here? Shouldn't he just say these words? But it was it was a lot of the people that ended up doing it. I know Hank was there, and I can't remember if Sarah was part of it. But the cool thing was, there was this song that was originally meant to be sung actually by Frank Rich, who was the critic in the Times at that time. Not him really, but someone playing that. And they had to get up out of the audience and stop the show, and it was the song about how you're not going to succeed with this show because you won't succeed on Broadway if you don't have any Jews. That was the song. And my husband Brian heard that song and he said, you have to do that song. And I said, okay. And I went to them and said, is there any way I could do this song? I mean, I would never in a million years ask something like that. And they said, well, I don't know, we'll have to figure out how we can get you off stage and into the... Well, ultimately, they gave me the song. It wasn't Frank Rich. They found a way for it to be the character. They found a whole new, not just because of me, a whole new second half of the show that made it a journey to get to Broadway. And one of the things that Mike did was, because he understood Broadway, understood theater, he gave it a heart that was still compatible, because he's a smart, funny guy, with the anarchy of the Pythons. And somehow that, because otherwise it would have been just sketches. But this storyline that he gave them, or that they discovered, they found about, we've got a quest to go to Broadway, gave it a focus and an emotional journey that allowed all the wacky, funny stuff to give people more of an emotional experience than they expected from this kind of show.
Yeah. Did you and Eric Hyde, did you get to be friends? Did you talk? Did you talk comedy? Did you talk bits? Did you talk?
We've been friends ever since.
Yeah.
We did a thing up at the 92nd Street Y, one of the places up there where I interviewed him basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have done stuff since then, and I love him very much.
Do you talk about comedy? And do you talk about bits, or do you talk? How
No.
do you talk about everything but show business?
It's not. It's weird. It's not. I mean, imagine if we were. I'm not a writer, so we're not in a room together working in that way, and it isn't something we tend to talk about family and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, John Cleese and I were going to try to do a farce together, a seldom done Feydeau farce, and I think we both realized that there was a reason why it is seldom done, but that was fun, just the possibility of that, and also getting to meet all the Pythons, because they all came to opening. That was nice.
Do you think that, because your comedy style is very deadpan, and which is great, and I think not so common in the United States, but more common in England.
Mm-hmm.
Were you that before you saw Monty Python, or did you think that's why you resonated with that, or did you, when you saw that, you thought, that's what I want to do? I want to do that style.
It was no, it was the former. I'll tell you, this is another one of those things that I don't know why I remember it, but it was obviously something that meant something to me at the time. This is a little bit like you and your fan organ. Mm-hmm. That's a sentence I haven't said a lot. So I was in elementary school and in line for the cafeteria, and I told a joke, and I realized in the moment that it would be funnier if I didn't laugh when I told it. And I remember biting my cheeks. Now, I don't know how, I was little. I was elementary school.
Wow.
But something, there's some instinct or something, maybe it was, my dad, I don't know, something that I absorbed and didn't realize. But yeah, I've always, and one of the things I've had to play with in musicals and doing musicals, because musicals don't tend to be deadpan events.
Yes.
So here's a bit of candor, not the John Candor kind. One of the things you guys asked me about was showing a clip of when I did Penny in My Pocket on the Tony Awards from Hello Dolly. And that was a very, I guess, deadpan. I mean, that was a very sober kind of guy. And I watched a little bit of it. And I had not seen it before, and I couldn't watch it. Because in Radio City Music Hall, with a camera back there, to see this guy doing like, I thought, oh my God, this is horrifying. I'm surprised they didn't take away my union card. So, but I think it worked in the show, but I've realized as I do different kinds of musicals, like doing this kind of musical, that finding ways to express yourself in a different way, or even express different parts of yourself, that's part of the journey of doing musicals. And it also works backward. It also affects how I do plays as well. It's been, I'm loving that, actually.
Do you normally like when you were doing Frasier or doing any television films, do you normally watch yourself, and is that your usual reaction, not to like what you see, or can you watch it and actually enjoy it and go, oh, that was good, I did exactly what I wanted to do?
That's a really good question, because people are so different about that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I watched Frasier and was basically pleased, and it wasn't the sort of thing. I think because you're doing a new episode every week, it's not like if you're doing a show and or I don't know, and for movies you don't usually get the opportunity to see yourself unless you're a big star producer who's also looking at the footage. And theater, I think I rarely get to see myself. I don't go to Lincoln Center and watch the shows, and there's not much call for it. So it's never what, I won't say what one thinks, it's never what I think it is. So certainly that was an eye-opener. But I also, the theater for me is the connection on stage. It is that, the joy of the theater for me is to connect this way with an actor and know that we're connecting that way with them.
Yeah.
When I did Hello, Dolly with Bet, first of all, she was incredible. And, but one of the things she said when we were first rehearsing, because she's used to doing her shows with her, backup singers and everything, and she said, I'm not used to looking sideways. But she did. She absolutely did. She was an incredible ensemble player, because this is the same thing with Kelsey Grammer. Kelsey and Bet both, they know that they've got the goods. So they have no problem with other people being able to shine and with playing with other people. It's a great thing. And she knows that she can play with anyone on stage and she still has the audience in the palm of her hand.
Yeah.
So that's what I love. And it's no fun, I'm sure you've experienced this too, when someone's just like doing their show to the audience and you're like talking to their ears.
Yes.
I don't like that.
Yeah.
But by the same token, I sometimes have to make myself, especially in musicals, I have to sort of thread that needle of, sometimes you got to find a reason to look out there.
Yeah.
So.
Did you know Bet before you started?
We had done a movie, I think like 10 years before, called Isn't She Great? And she was, but I don't think it was. And so we were up in Montreal shooting. She played Jacqueline Suzanne. It was a biography of Jacqueline Suzanne, and Nathan Lane played her husband. And we had a really good time. I was her editor on the book Valley of the Dolls. So we had a good time there, but really got to know each other on Dolly.
So you had great chemistry before, because your chemistry was so great in Hello, Dolly.
I think we knew each other well enough to be able to work together, but the chemistry and the trust and the fun came from rehearsal.
Yeah.
And came from, honestly, I can say for me, came from admiration of her. She's just a workhorse. She was always the one to say, well, let's do it one more time. And she was so respectful of the ensemble. She was deeply in awe, as I was from my first musical scene. Yeah. I always, the word elite now is a bad word, and we make it a plural, and it's elites, and it basically means assholes. But there was a time when you had elite athletes and elite, soldiers and elite, and I remember thinking of the ensemble as the elites, as like the Marines, because they could do anything.
Yeah.
And they would. They did what they were asked. They didn't, no matter how difficult or anything like that. And it was always such a lesson in the best of what the theater can be.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. They're so often unappreciated or underappreciated. People don't really realize that they're carrying most of the show is the ensemble.
And let me just go back to the visitor and say, I can look into the eyes of any person on that stage and any role, and they are there.
Yeah.
Nobody's doing a performance. They are 100% heart and soul there, and it is a pleasure and a joy, and we play off each other. It doesn't matter what the role. So that's amazing.
Yeah. When you were talking about rehearsing, do you I suspect that you're the kind of person that you can't rehearse too much. You'll never say, "Oh, I've had it's too much rehearsal for me." Am I correct, or do you get to a point where you're like, "Okay, done with rehearsals now. Let's."
No, no, you're correct. I love to rehearse, and I continue. That's another thing that Ms. Hagen always said. She said, "Oh, I'm so much better on the last performance than I was on the first," and I completely agree. And that's the joy to me of continuing to evolve. But there is an exception, which is when I was first on Frasier, and Jimmy Burrows, legendary television director who directed our first season, most of our first season, and I think part of our second, directed all of Friends, directed all of Will and Grace, Taxi, like legendary. And at one point one of the early episodes, Jane Leaves and I were trying to work out a bit. And he saw us and he said, "What are you doing?" And we said, "Rehearsing." He said, "Stop that." He said, and what I don't know if he articulated it, but what he understood is, in half-hour television, the amount of rehearsal time you have is exactly right for the show to be alive and spontaneous and still precise. You can kill stuff in that format by overdoing it, because the material, we're not doing Chekhov, and also we're doing a new script every week, so you're not digging deeper and deeper into something. And he just knew that we'd be fine. You're gonna kill it if you work it too hard. So that's another perspective on it.
And you trusted that.
Totally, I trust him totally.
One of the things when I did the show, one of the things that I remember was sitting watching you do scenes and rehearsing them. and for people that haven't actually sat in a live television taping like that, you do retakes and retakes, and sometimes they throw new jokes at you and new ways to do the scene if they don't hear the audience laughing like they need to. I remember watching you do one scene, and I watched you they kept throwing different ideas at you, and you did it 4 different ways, and each of the 4 was hilariously funny, and it was so spontaneous, and it was, and I thought, how do they edit this guy? How do they choose a best take? Because of that, and it's so obviously you really perfected that whole.
Well, it's
technique.
the joy of when you play a character for such a long time, and when you play with these other actors for such a long time. I mean, 11 years we did that show. So it's all in you. Yeah. So they can toss things at you, and you just know without thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that was a great lesson for me when I watched you on that show. Really, that was I thought, because I always liked you when I watched the show. I thought, now I get it. Now I understand who this guy is.
Well, you were so great, Cam Winston.
Winston,
Cam
great
Winston.
memory.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know if I would have remembered
the
that.
Upstairs neighbor.
Yeah, the crazy. Well, thank you.
Terrific.
All right, so before I get embarrassed, we're gonna take a 60-second break here.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and we're gonna give our sponsors some love, and we'll be back to talk about a little bit more, maybe about Frasier and a bunch of other things, because we got so many things to talk about. We'll be back in a minute.
Hello. This is Broadway, the beginning of something truly spectacular, where you'll always get goosebumps. This is where time stops every time a show starts. This is Broadway, and we can't wait to welcome you home.
That's how you join the circle. That's how we make a many songs one song. That's how we join the circle. That's how we're strong. That's how we join the
Okay, welcome back. So we're back. So we were talking about Frasier.
Yep.
How did that role come about for you?
The sequence is, I was happily working as an actor in New York. I was doing theater, Broadway, off-Broadway. I was doing regional theater and stuff like that. And my now husband, then partner, Brian, who was an actor, he wanted to try writing for television. He'd always wanted to write for television. So he was going to go out to LA because that was the place to do that. And I really was not excited about the prospect of going to Los Angeles, but I thought, well, if he's going to go there, I got to go and find out, whether I can even stand living there. So I went and auditioned for pilot season while I was out there, and auditioned for a bunch of pilots, and including ER, and I think Chicago Hope too. It was a long time ago. We'll have to explain that to the audience too, what those shows are. And the last thing I did was a Norman Lear sitcom called The Powers That Be. And I remember because I auditioned for Norman for this part of a press secretary, and he said afterwards, he said, "That was completely wrong, but have you ever thought about directing?" And that was his response to the audition. So I went back, that was my last audition, went back to New York, and then they called me and they said, "We have this other part that we think you'd be right for." And the setting of the show was he was a governor, John Forsythe, basically a Ronald Reagan type. It was at that period. And Holland Taylor, played his wife, and I was his suicidal son-in-law, a congressman named Theodore. And the audition was that I had to climb up on a chair and tie the curtain rope around my neck of the curtains along the windows and jump off and open the curtains. So nothing happened. So I basically mimed that, and I got the part. So I went and I did that show, and that was my first TV show in LA. And it, for various reasons, didn't last. But the people who were putting Frasier together saw it, and the casting director said to the creators, they said, "Listen, if you ever are planning to have a brother for Frasier, this guy looks like him." So they looked at video, I guess back then, or kinescope, something, of me, and they brought me in for a meeting. And I met with the three creators of the show, Peter Casey, David Lee, and David Angel, and the casting director, Jeff Greenberg. And they said, "So what we're thinking is that since Frasier went to Harvard, that his brother Niles will have gone to Yale, and since Frasier is a Freudian, that Niles will be a Jungian." And I said, okay, and we talked a little bit more. And I knew that John Mahoney was going to play the dad, and I knew about him because I had heard, we were talking earlier about House of Blue Leaves. Yeah. I hadn't seen him on stage, but I knew he was a great actor, and I knew Kelsey's work from Cheers. So I thought it was an interesting show, and I went home, and I called my agent and said, "Well, I think it went okay." And she said, "Well, it must have gone okay because they've offered you the part."
Wow.
And I was like, and then I started to panic. I thought, well, what part? I haven't even read a script. And when I finally got to read the pilot script, I read it and I thought, oh, this is terrible. I thought, they've written two of exactly the same character. That's so stupid. Because the brother,
Yes.
I was wrong. That when we did the first table read, people were hysterical. And when we filmed the first episode, the audience went nuts. And I didn't know what that meant, but Kelsey afterwards said he knew in that moment that we were going to be okay.
Wow. Do you have a favorite episode of all the episodes, or episodes that stick out in your head?
Well, the one that I am most frequently talked to about is one where it's just me and the dog, and it's a scene where I'm getting ready for a date, and through a series of circumstances end up completely destroying the Frasier's apartment, and it has the overture to The Marriage of Figaro playing underneath the whole thing, and it's basically I don't know how long it was, 9 minutes or something, of silent movie acting.
Oh, wow.
So that's the one that people talk to, but there's a lot of great ones. There's one where we did a radio play. There's one where Frasier and I tried to open a restaurant. Some great farces. There's one called The Ski Lodge where all these people were in love with different people, and it was just a literally run-around farce. This is something that Jimmy Burrows, as our director, to give you an idea of how good he was. So we had a live audience, and sometimes these farce episodes would require lots of different sets because you'd be running from one to another and slamming doors just like in any farce. So they would be physically laid out all over the soundstage. So it would sometimes take time to get from this scene into the next scene, which was going to be all the way at the end. And Jimmy would always have the sound guy play Flight of the Bumblebee on the sound system as the cameras and all of us went down. So for the live audience, they wouldn't lose the energy and the momentum of the, because, you know, he came from theater.
That's brilliant.
His dad was Abe Burrows, a great man of the theater. So, yeah.
That's brilliant. Okay, I got to go back. So the silent movie one.
Yeah.
How did you rehearse that? Was that all written out bit by bit, or did you throw in things? And how did you guys rehearse that? Because rehearsing something silently is very differently than rehearsing a scene with another person.
It's quieter.
Yeah, for one.
They scripted it. They figured out in the room. It started out, I remember David Lee, one of the writers, said his original idea was a sort of Mr. Bean moment. What would that be? And at one point he was thinking of, like, Niles would get locked out of his hotel room naked or something, and thank God they didn't go with that. So then they started pitching in the room, all right, well, what if this happens? Well, okay, but then, and then how would that lead to this, and how would it lead to that? So they pieced it all out, and then my job was to put the pieces together,
Yeah.
you know, sort of
Remember
link them.
it.
Well, remember it.
And transitions.
And just link it thought-wise. And the other cool thing, David Lee, who directed it, he put the dog in the scene for a very technical reason, which was, with no one else in the scene, he had no place to cut to. You know, there's no reason to.
Yes, cut away.
But the benefit of that was just that the looks that he got, you know, cutting to that dog, because the scene gets more and more, the couch gets set on fire, and I've got a fire extinguisher, and just cutting back, talk about deadpan to the dog going like,
Yeah.
it was gold. It was probably the best part of the scenes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's great, because those are so hard to do, those kinds of scenes.
Yeah.
You know, when you're not
Yeah.
saying anything, and so much fun if you if you're facile with that kind of comedy and have a great imagination as well. Did you study improvisation?
No, I didn't study it, and I'm afraid of it. There, I said it.
But it was so much of what you did, and that was the first thing that I thought when I saw you do those scenes 4 ways. I thought, oh, he's studied a lot of improvisation.
You
because
know,
that's what
I do it on stage. You know, and Bet and I did some improv. You know, in the dumpling scenes.
I heard about that moment when one fell to the
yes.
floor.
All kinds of things happen.
Yes.
And so it's not that I don't do it. It's just I guess it's very hard for me to let go of the grasp of the scripted word and the play and say, okay, we're actually going to go out and just, you know, take suggestions from an audience and create something. But I don't know. I might be good at it. I just
if you don't call it improvisation,
maybe that's it.
You would
if
be
I just
fine.
call it
just call it playing.
Yeah, drinking
theater
game.
games.
We're going to have a drinking game.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go. So that show had the best writers on television. I remember that was one of the things about that show, is that writers aspired to write for Frasier.
Yeah.
Did that give you more or less creative freedom as a performer?
More. Because we never had to worry about the writing. And it worked both ways. If a moment wasn't working, the writers never had to think, oh, they just can't do this. They had a really good group of actors there. And similarly, if something wasn't working, we knew it wasn't because, well, these guys really don't know how to write this. It's like they could write anything, and they did.
Yeah.
So that allowed for real trust and open conversation, which doesn't always happen on television shows like that. There's a sort of hierarchy in a way of, you know, who gets to talk to who. And we were very respectful of and trusted each other.
That was one of the things that I loved when I was on the show, was observing that and how you all talk to each other.
Yeah.
And I remember Kelsey saying, oh, this joke is not quite working here, and you know, it needs to have more of a so-and-so. You guys figure it out.
Yeah.
And it was total trust in each other. And I remember also during the note sessions, those writers were so quick. Those were the funniest sessions, because they would just come up with the funniest quips, not even related to the script sometimes, just the way they all thought funny.
Yeah.
And we're all incredibly facile and bright and
And the other thing they did, and this is again respecting the live audience, it was very rare that they would allow a show to go in front of an audience where something wasn't figured out. Sometimes you'll go to a taping or filming of a show, and the writers will be standing around on set trying to figure something out. What about this? What about that? That I could almost say never happened on our show. There were quick conferences to fix a joke or tweak a joke, but usually it was probably one of the other options that they'd already been playing around with, because they wanted that live audience. There's so much theater in the writing room. There's so much theater in the company, and that we wanted them to have the experience.
That's great.
That's part of the fun.
Like chicken 5 ways, When one didn't work, here's
Yeah.
another dish. So.
Yeah.
You just finished the first season of HBO Max's Julia.
Yes.
And it's an upcoming series about Julia Child. Who do you play? Tell me a little bit
So
about
I
that.
play Paul Child, her husband, and it's an amazing role because he was an amazing man, and it's great fun for me because he's also someone we don't know that much about. Most people don't know that much about, but he was incredible. They met in the OSS during World War II. He was an incredible visual artist, a painter. He worked with his hands. He built, beautiful and woodworks, chests and drawers. He rebuilt their kitchen so that it would be high enough for her because she was 7 feet tall.
Wow.
All that, and he loved her deeply, and she loved him, and it's sort of a famously supportive mutual relationship. And one of the things we explore in the show is that he also had to go, this was in the early 60s, from being kind of the guy and the one who introduced her to cooking and to that sort of high level of, when they were in France, of sophisticated food and lifestyle, and he was a diplomat. And then when they came back to the States, and he was no longer a diplomat, and her cookbook became, world renowned, and then the TV show started, and that role reversal happened, and he supported her, and he was just there for her, and which is cool. And one thing that the writers explore in this is some of the inevitable conflict that must have been there between these two very strong personalities, because all we really know from the outside is that they loved each other and supported each other. But as anyone who is married knows, for a long period of time, that support comes out of working through stuff. It's not just sweetness and roses the whole time. So it's been very interesting to sort of thread the needle of taking the historical stuff we know, and for the writers to create the tensions that we know somehow had to be there, to elucidate that stuff. And that's been fascinating.
Yeah.
And also a show with a great cast, amazing group of people.
I can't wait to see it.
It's good. So one cool thing, I went and did a little looping, additional dialogue recording, and the editor who worked on it, he was in LA, and he said to me, I've been working on this for 6 weeks. Every night I go hungry, because the food looks so beautiful. And I saw, and some of it's food porn. The way they have shot it. And Sarah Lancashire, who plays Julia Child, wonderful British actress, who does a really beautiful embodiment of Julia Child. Not an impression and she's just great. But also, her mom had actually been a cordon bleu cook. So she grew up learning all these techniques. So the first episode we did where she was making an omelet, it was like, she just did it. And to not have to worry about that, because that would be weeks and weeks and weeks of someone learning how to do eggs and stuff. But she's already expert, and so I'm excited. I'm very excited.
Are you a foodie, or do you appreciate good food? Do you
I
make
appreciate good food.
You said Brian. Brian,
Brian,
is a great
my
chef.
husband Brian is a real chef, a trained chef. He had a catering business at one point, and so he's the one who cooks if anyone's going to cook. But I can do basic stuff, and I'm a fan of eating.
Are you, and you narrated something about wine too, like Napa Valley, right?
Oh, yeah.
Are you a fan of wine as well?
Yeah, again, I played this guy. It's a little bit like Kels. We both played these people who were opera lovers and wine lovers, and I like opera and I'll drink wine, but I don't know nearly as much as the character I played. So, but I'm trying to learn as fast as I can.
Yeah.
Just by quantity.
Yeah, that's okay. That's always a good way to do it. What are some, like, do you have personal passions? What are some of your personal passions outside of work? What do you do for fun? What lights you up?
Well, I this is going to be sad maybe, but I play the piano every day. I play a Bach Prelude and Fugue every morning, and
Different one?
I go through the books. There's 2 books.
Why is that
40
sad? Why is that sad?
I don't know. Well, you said, what do you do for fun? And I thought, I just pictured people thinking, yeah, that's so sad, this man sitting at a piano. I thought he was going to be like going disco hopping or something, but so they have discos anymore.
Jumping out of planes.
Yeah.
No, not for a while
you know
now.
what? It started, I did this play called La Bête, and it's set in the 1600s, and I was playing a very sort of ascetic kind of poet-writer. And I was over
the
in
Mark Rylance one,
with
right?
Mark
You did with
Rylance,
Mark,
yes,
which is great.
and Joanna
Another
Lumley.
Great
And it
performance
started
of
in
both.
London, and I had this idea that because I wanted to have a keyboard in my apartment because I like to play, and I decided I'm just going to bring Bach. I'm going to leave my Chopin, I'm going to leave my Beethoven, I'm going to only play Bach and have that Spartan kind of spare aesthetic somehow filter into the character. And it just, because there's nobody like Bach, so I just keep doing it. And I go.
You do Prelude and Fugue in D minor on the organ. Did you learn that one?
I did learn that one. I did a bunch of Bach on the organ.
Yeah.
Some of the other stuff and cantatas and concertos and and I was a big. Do you know who Virgil Fox was?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
Or
I had
huge
a Virgil
organist.
Fox album, and Virgil Fox, for those who don't know, was like a rock star, literally rock star, on the organ, and he played like Fillmore East and all that with psychedelic light shows, and people got completely drugged out of their mind, and he played Bach.
Yeah. I remember him well. We had a few Virgil
Ah.
Fox albums in my home as
Yeah.
well. It's Yale. Talk to me about Yale.
Okay.
Because you actually went to Yale.
I did.
So
I did.
And was that a coincidence that
Yes.
with
Yeah, no, because Fraser's going to Harvard had been set up, I think, on Cheers.
Wow.
So that was coincidence. I went to Yale, and I had originally was going to be a music major. This is something I tell to like students whenever I talk to students. I knew in my heart and soul that what I was going to be was a pianist. I was going to play the piano, and I was wrong. But that's okay, because I pursued it. When I got to school, I was from a relatively small town, and I was very good in that small town playing the piano. Then when I went to Yale and was dealing with people who were there to be music majors, I thought, oh, I see. And also I realized my passion for it wasn't sufficient to sit in a practice room for 8 hours a day or to take all of the music history classes. And I found out I could take lessons, piano and organ lessons, which I did, and take some theory classes and stuff and do other things. And meanwhile, I was having fun acting.
Yes.
I joined the Yale Gilbert and Sullivan Society because as a young person, I had gone to a summer camp that every summer their musical thing was they would do a Gilbert and Sullivan operetta. Again, early roots of musicals in my head.
Yeah.
So growing up on that, when I went to Yale, I acted in HMS Pinafore, and then I directed Princess Ida, which no one knows. But and then all my roommates. So when I was first in my freshman room, there were 3 jocks and me, and then there was a sort of common room, and then the other room was 3 actors and a jock. And after about a day, there was a very brief conference, and we switched. And so I ended up rooming with these guys for all 4 years, and because they were theater majors, that got me interested in being part of the theater. And this is something I really wanted to say. Throughout my life, there have been people who have made a difference. You know what I mean? People who have sometimes intentionally, sometimes offhandedly allowed me to move further. And one of them was this guy, his name was Bart Toish, He ran the theater studies department. I was not in theater studies. I had a very small part in a production, a senior student's production of Man for All Seasons. And so the guy playing, Thomas More, it was his senior project or whatever. And I played a small part. And afterwards, this guy, Bart Toish, came up to me and said, "You were really good." And I thought, how was I really good? I didn't do anything. But
That's why you were really good.
it stuck with me. I thought, well, it just resonated with me. And so I took his class, and then that led me to be ultimately a theater major. And the other great thing about Yale was in the undergraduate program there, Nikos Sakaropoulos, who founded and ran the Williamstown Theater Festival, taught. Austin Pendleton, one of the great actors on the planet, taught. Lynn Meadow, a great
yes.
teacher and also runs the Manhattan Theater Club. So undergraduate, not in the drama school, great separation between the two, and I'm working with these real professionals, and Nikos brought me up to Williamstown. This is the next person I want to mention, and Edward Herman. Edward Herman, this wonderful actor, he's gone now,
Yes.
but he played a Franklin Roosevelt in Eleanor and Franklin,
Yes.
great stage actor. I was in a play with him, and he even wrote recommendations for me when I was applying to drama school, because I got out of college, and after my last year of college, I was at Williamstown. And he came to me and he said, before you spend any more time or money in school, why don't you go to New York and see if you even want to do this? And I said, okay. The other thing he did was he contacted Mary Cahoon, a casting director here in New York, and said, you should see this guy. So he not only gave me that advice, he did that thing. I auditioned for her, general audition. She brought me in for Beyond Therapy, a Chris Durang play that had been done off Broadway. It was just moving to Broadway. It was going to have John Lithgow in it and Diane Wiest, and I got the part.
Wow.
As of the waiter, a small part, but it's because of him, because of what he did, that brought me to New York. And the same thing with Bart, and so.
Do you feel like there's some kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, divine guidance, or do you feel that like, you know, I mean, as I get older, I look back on my life and I think, I cannot believe my life and the way that it's gone. And then you start seeing patterns and things that happen, and the people that you meet that gave you this one little hint in your ear that took and meant something else. I mean, have you made connections like that in your life, or do you think there's something like you're fated to be that person, or is it totally a random act that happens, or what do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's such an awesome question. I don't think of it as, what did you say, divine guidance? Is that what you said? I don't think of it as divine guidance, because I usually think and hope that the divine has better things to do. You know. But I think it's about openness. I think being in the right place at the right time is a bit of a misnomer, because you can only be where you are. And we are always where we are. And I think especially for like young actors, aspiring actors, we're always trying to be what that thing is, and what you learn the longer you are at it is just come back, it's you. But you will only be able to be in the right place at the right time if you're open to what's around you and what opportunities present themselves. And it doesn't mean that you always make the right choices, but so there's something about that, and that does to me get back into, I don't know if it's the divine, but I certainly believe that some of the worst things we're all going through now come from closing ourselves off from each other. And in fact, in the show that I'm doing now, the character who has lost his wife has closed himself off because he doesn't want to feel any more pain. And it's only the opening up of himself that happens through these other people. It doesn't eliminate the pain, but he realizes, you know, this is what life is. You know, you don't eliminate suffering. You have empathy and you reach out. So I'm getting awful philosophical now,
No,
but
I love this.
You know, I think, and it's true on stage. It's what an audience feels when, you know, when Bette Midler's up there doing her thing. What they are responding to is her heart is open to them. She's saying, "I am here for you. I am so glad I'm here for you," and we feel it.
Yeah.
And those of us on stage with her feel it.
Yeah. You seem to me like you're kind of like a quiet warrior for inclusivity as well. I mean, just the way you think of things, and I know the interest that you've had in your life, and the causes that you've been involved with. What's the role of arts in society to you?
It is. It is no question to me. It is to hold the mirror up to nature. That Shakespeare quote. It is to show us ourselves, to resonate with what's going on in the world, and to resonate with the possibility that we can be better. And also to bring us outside ourselves. At the same time, here I am saying, well, you have to be in yourself. But if you're open in yourself, then the rest of the world can be part of you. You know, and I think that's what the arts do, is just surprise people.
Yes. Do you think artists have an obligation to do that, or do you think it's like it's a chosen thing?
I don't know, because I think, you know, sometimes
Successful artists, I should even say, because
I think those of us who have attained some sort of, you know, visibility or whatever, I think there's definitely a certain responsibility to be responsible. But sometimes when the mission is too present, it's off-putting. You know, in a work of art, sometimes you know, making a statement, it's like, yeah, that's a statement. That doesn't get me.
Yeah.
But you know, I've been very involved with the Alzheimer's Association, and part of that is because I have family members who I've lost to that.
So sorry about that.
But
it's a tough disease.
It is, and there are amazing organizations, you know, all over the country, all over the world, who are dealing with this. And right now, even though, you know, there's a lot of research going on, it's a lot about taking care of people. But one of the things that hit me early on in that cause was that people with Alzheimer's were not being talked about. It's much different now, but that whole thing was not, in the same way that money wasn't being funded for research, in the same way that initially money wasn't funded for AIDS research, because these diseases were happening to people who don't matter. Homosexuals and drug addicts were getting AIDS, old people were getting Alzheimer's. And until we began to realize that they are us, either because they were in our family, or people were aging, or whatever, or other people were getting sick, until we were open to that, it was a very cruel world for those diseases. So that's, I think, one the other resonance, aside from my family connection, is having lived through also the AIDS crisis. And,
So as an artist, what are your next steps? What do you feel you still want to discover? Are there, or do you even plan that out?
I don't look ahead. I kind of look at what is on look at what comes to me and make decisions based on that. I found after that amazing journey on television, which among other things, it gave me exposure, it gave me a name, it gave me resources that allow me to do things that are nothing like that. Little gnarly plays at Playwrights Horizons, and crazy brave new musicals at the Public Theater and stuff like that. And I find that so fulfilling. And then this TV show Julia comes along, which is it's a comedy, but it's also a drama. It's not a sitcom. It's a very different kind of acting. But it's a guy who I so love. So that's why I'm doing that. So I think those are the things that, it's just whatever grabs me.
And when you have a lot of options, is there usually one that goes, oh, that's one that one's calling to me right now? Is there just something that goes off in you that says?
Well, maybe, you know, depending on the situation. Sometimes there's a bunch, like when I was doing the TV show, doing Julia, The Visitor was set to start rehearsals in September, and fortunately, Tom Kitt and Daniel Goldfarb, who writes is the lead writer on Julia, are best friends.
Oh.
So there was a lot of mutual wanting everyone to get along. But what happened was, because of we didn't have to ever shut down on Julia, but there were some COVID scares that caused us to go a little longer than we expected. And because of all of the roiling passions in the process of doing The Visitor, and them realizing that it wasn't just going to be remounting it, we were going to be doing rewriting, they decided to start it earlier. So that's a case where the options overlapped, and I actually missed the first 2 weeks of rehearsal which I hated to do, and then literally finished, I think, shooting on a Thursday night and flew in Friday morning and walked into the rehearsal room to start, having not done theater for a year and a half. I forgot about that part.
Did that take a second to like
A little
get
bit.
into gear?
It took a little time, especially because when you're doing a film thing on television, the director in the pilot, he would say to me, "Can you talk a little quieter?" And I was like, no one has ever said that to me, but I said, sure, okay. And I realized, oh God, I guess I'm used to doing theater or something. But then when you've done that for whatever it was, 4 or 5 months, and you come back and you're in a musical, you're like, yeah.
Can you talk a little louder?
Yeah, really.
Please?
So I'm still getting used to that.
Do you have hopes for our industry, like where we go now? I mean, again, the world has been turned upside down, and there's been so many things that have been kind of laid bare. And
Yeah, well, I think that I think there's a lot of exciting stuff happening. The productions that I'm seeing, the kind of redistribution of roles and writers and re-examining authority, and I absolutely believe there are times where sometimes it goes too far, but that's where we are. It is such a it is a reaction to something so huge that it's not a time of nuance in those responses. But what I'm seeing, from my perspective, and look, I'm one of the issues in my show is that the story, the film it's originally based on, and the story we're telling, is centered on a white guy. And not only is it centered on a white guy, but they have cast the actual whitest person in America to play the role. So in the midst of all this, something that was part of the conversation before is now the conversation. And I get it, and I'm a willing partner in that conversation as we figure out how, okay, what is this stuff that we took for granted, we can't anymore.
Yeah.
And so we have to re-examine it, and we are, and I think that's good.
And what a great place to explore it in the theater. I
Yes.
mean, that's where
And-
that change can happen.
My journey as an actor in this piece is completely paralleled by the journey of the character I'm playing. When I saw on the faces of these young people of color in my show, when we were doing these Zoom calls, and George Floyd happened, and Ahmaud Arbery happened, and Breonna Taylor, and as horrified as I was, to see not the shock of horror, but the shock of recognition on their faces, to hear, and these are not strangers to me, these are people who I can swear to their gifts and their artistry and their soul and their, empathy and all these other things, these wonderful, wonderful people, and to hear one of them say, oh, I'm afraid when I ride my bicycle through a white neighborhood, I'm just naturally petrified. I never saw these things. I still remember the day, early workshops. I've been part of this for about 4 years. And one of the young black actors in the show, they were having lunch, and I walked into the room, and he turned to me and said, David, this isn't a white savior story, is it? And I'd never heard the phrase before. And as soon as he said it, I knew exactly what it meant. And I said, which I still believe to be true, I said, I don't think so, because this guy doesn't save anyone. He's incapable of saving anyone, including himself. And when this production was going to happen, my agent said to me, this is going to be a thing. And I said, look, if I can be part of enabling that conversation, I'm there. So I feel like that's what we're doing, and that's where we all are now.
Yeah. It's our artist's responsibility, like we were talking about earlier. And what can we do and to make that change? So see, this is what I love. I call these circular conversations. When you start talking about a lot of different things,
they
come
all
back to
they all connect. Yeah.
Yeah, they really do, because it's almost where we started the conversation was with that. And, got a few more questions for you two. Just our last maybe 3 questions. But before we do that, I want to announce winners. We've got winners.
Oh, awesome.
Of our audience giveaway that we have. So, all right, you ready? The winner of the signed Dr. Niles Crane Funko Pop, could I have a drum roll, please?
Yes.
There you go. See? Is Jalisa Nicole from Maine.
Yay! Oh, Maine, awesome.
Yeah. The winner of the signed can of Spamalot Spam.
Ooh.
Crescendo, Megan Beast from New Jersey.
Awesome.
Yes, it's cool.
Awesome.
But please don't eat the spam. It expired in 2008.
Yes, it's from the original production. You'll die.
Yeah. Don't do that. So just display it next to your other David Hyde Pierce memorabilia.
Yes.
So, okay, congratulations. If you don't know, if you have no clue what we're talking about right now, follow us on Instagram at Crossovers Live, and then you'll get some great explanations there. So we're gonna wrap this up with a few little things here.
All right.
We have a little segment we called Biggest Lesson Learned. So we have a quick question, quick answer.
okay.
Not anything complicated.
All right.
Just kind of first thing that comes to your head.
Okay.
It's an improv. Oh, I didn't say that
Oh,
word,
no.
did I? All right.
Damn.
So biggest lesson learned from Spamalot.
This is literally, I'll be fast, but this is a Mike Nichols direction, which he came back to the show after we'd been running for a month, and he said, okay, as soon as you figured out the perfect way to get your laugh, as he put it, your perfect squeak and turn, he said, don't do that.
Wow.
He said, you can always do it the next night, but just let it go and see what happens.
Wow.
Yes.
Great lesson.
Because amazing things happen,
Yeah.
including nobody ever gets to say, oh, that you spoiled my laugh, because you don't have your laugh anymore. It's all free, and so there you go.
Oh man, I wish I would have
Yeah.
worked with him. That's one of my.
He was he was awesome.
Yeah. Norman Lear. Biggest lesson learned from Norman Lear.
Never give up. That man is still fighting. I mean, his television work is astounding, and will, live. All in the Family, shows like that will live as long as there's television. But he continues to work People for the American Way. He is tireless. He's 100,
Yeah.
and he will not give up on America.
Yeah. Biggest lesson learned from Broadway versus off-Broadway.
That's good. What is it? Biggest lesson learned from Broadway versus off-Broadway. It's nice to have your own dressing room, but it's also fun to share.
Biggest lesson learned from Brian Hargrove, your husband.
That's a hard one to answer. How blessed it is to be loved.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful lesson. Biggest lesson learned from or about paparazzi.
They have to eat.
Biggest lesson learned from working on The Simpsons.
It's amazing how many people watch The Simpsons.
Biggest lesson learned from Frasier.
Gosh. I'm cycling through so many moments. I don't know what lesson did I learn from Frasier. That the writing is everything.
Okay, and here's an easy one. Biggest lesson learned about life.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's good. I think it seems to me that life is a progression of learning more and more to let go until you finally actually let go at the end.
Yeah. I guess that's the hard part, right? The actual letting go.
Yeah.
Takes a lifetime to learn that.
Yeah.
Okay, 2 last questions for you.
All right.
If you could do any other job in the world, can't be in entertainment,
Okay.
what would you do?
Do I have to be good at it to do it?
Just something that you would love to do, or no, you just something that makes you go, that I would.
Church organist.
And finally, because we're coming up on Thanksgiving,
Yes?
what are you most grateful for?
I am most grateful for the life I've been given and the people in it, and the dogs. It's a long list.
Yeah.
I guess I would just say I'm so grateful for my life.
Yeah. Okay, so this has been everything that I thought it would be. Sitting down and riffing like
yeah.
this.
Well, you're so awesome.
And you're so awesome, and I love you, and I just love your heart and your spirit, and just your talent, your generosity, your kindness. I mean, he's like one of the nicest people you'll ever meet, and I just think you're just such a spectacular example, especially for young actors that are coming along. To see your skill and your kindness as well, and how you listen and respect people.
Thank you.
And it just is simple and it flows out of you. So
Can I tell you one more thing before we end?
Yeah.
I've got a big song in my show, The Visitor, which I didn't know until someone else in the cast called it that, is an 11 o'clock number.
Yeah.
And as soon as they said it's an 11 o'clock number, I thought, oh shoot, where's Stokes? But I'm doing what I can.
You kill that number, and I mean kill in a good way. By the way,
thanks.
it's a beautiful number.
Thanks.
But yeah, they're terrifying, aren't they?
Well, not for you. You're the master.
Oh no, they're always terrifying.
Yeah.
I think when we're not scared is when it gets dangerous.
I saw you do Impossible Dream on the street in front of Terrence McNally's house with no microphone, and you blew people off the sidewalk. It was absolutely astounding. And you stopped in the middle when a dog barked to say thank you, and then you went on. That was genius and mastery. So that's
well, thank you. That was a spectacular ceremony.
That was. It
and
was
what
beautiful.
a spectacular human being Terrence McNally was.
Great man.
I felt so honored to work with him and know him, and to be a part of all those celebrations of his life as well. And I'm so glad you were there, even though we saw each other across a crowded room, and we didn't even get to talk to each other. So, but thank you so much for being here, especially like I said earlier on. Thank you for being here on your day off.
Happy to.
I really appreciate that, and I know how hard that is, and how we cherish those days off on our age.
Well worth it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, if you haven't seen it, go see The Visitor at the Public Theater. It's really a spectacular show and performance as well. And they've been extended for one more week, so please go see it. I also want to let you all know that we are thrilled to announce our holiday episode on December 20th with 6-time Tony winner Audra McDonald and our second special guest, Ariana DeBose, who plays Anita in Steven Spielberg's West Side Story, which opens in theaters December 10th. So please give yourself some holiday cheer by joining us on December 20th. Thanks again, DHP. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
For all of you out there, please stay safe, stay healthy, stay well, and please stay in love with the arts.